Okay, so again, welcome, and I'm going to just briefly discuss what Medea is, what it's about. We're a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization. Our goal is to unite the technical, scientific, and industrial workforce by having programs such as this on commercialization, business on entrepreneurship, tech development, finance, things of that kind, and also try to bring people together through networking. And lately we've been we just finished, almost finished a broadband project to bring broadband to close the digital divide in areas that are underserved by broadband, which, if you heard about the infrastructure bill that just passed, there's $65 billion going to broadband. So there's work to be done to close the digital divide, including in the urban areas. Our next meeting is January 12th. We may also be doing the parade on the 2nd of December.
Yep.
We're doing that?
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely going to be, I have made contact with the city. Normally they reach out to me, but I will reach out to them and we'll get on board with the parade.
Okay, so January 12th is the next meeting, which will be with Lab Launch, talking about what they've been doing. I think they've been doing a lot since we last had them present. Feedback, if you have any feedback, you can email us at email@medeatech.org for future programs or comments on this program. After we're done here, for those that are here, and maybe anybody who's close by, we'll be going over to Cabrera's, which is right across the street, for a drink. So if you want to hang out and join us, that'd be great. And without further ado, I will introduce our presenter, who is Jim Cooper. He's the CTO and managing partner at the LA-based Grade Theory, a vertically integrated venture advisory and accelerator as a service company specializing in commercializing ocean, marine, and marine technology startups. Jim has a 25 years of experience in commercialization and focuses on novel early stage technology startups in the blue economy and adjacent areas. He specializes in market validation, competitive analysis, business modeling, and go-to-market strategy through the lens of evidence-based entrepreneurship. He is educated in Australia and the US in economics and molecular biology, and his experience is in both public and private sectors. Jim serves as ambassador and mentor at the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton, and is an industry mentor and advisor for the National Science Foundation's I-Corps teams. He serves in both the Student Success Network and the CSU PRB Biotech Program. Superb, yes. Across all 23 Cal State campuses. For over a decade, he has worked as a principal advisor at LARDA in their DOE, NIH, NOAA, and USDA SBIR CAT programs. Variously, Jim advises over a dozen startups and venture studios and wants to put fun back in fundraising or in fund. And while not advising early stage transformative technology companies, he can be found playing rugby, soccer, Gaelic, and Australian football. What is Gaelic football?
It's a game that's they play on Ireland with a round ball.
Okay. He loves eating ice cream, is an avid rock band photographer, and plays drums in a couple of punk bands. Little known facts. So please welcome Jim. Help you share. There you go.
All right, cool. Thanks, Bruce.
Speaking.
Yep.
In front of you.
I think I'm going to take my jacket off just to make myself a little bit more comfortable. Thanks to Medea Tech Launch for having me here tonight. And I have a strange accent, funny accent. If I talk too quickly or if I'm not talking enough, just remind me. Okay. I grew up in Australia, so I've stuck with this accent. So I wanted to talk to you today about the blue economy, what the opportunities that are there, and a little bit about the oceans and about our programming at my company, Braid Theory. we're located here in Los Angeles in that hotbed of innovation, San Pedro. For those of you who don't know San Pedro very well, there's an expression that we say in San Pedro. I don't live in San Pedro, but there's an expression that people in San Pedro say, and that is, no one goes to San Pedro unless they're going to San Pedro. And by the way, I didn't know until probably 2010 when I first started working in the kind of the harbour area for another accelerator incubator at the time, was that you pronounce San Pedro and not San Pedro. I got a couple of funny looks early on as a result of that. So, but everyone, welcome and thanks for joining. So I want to start off with a bit of a definition. There's a lot to kind of think about when we're looking at the blue economy, because it is actually rather broad. It's an economic ecosystem, which means that we have everything from jobs, workforce development, economic development, real estate and planning, all of the regulatory stuff that goes with that. And I'll briefly touch on the regulatory environment as well for the blue economy and some of the difficulties that we have to deal with that. It seeks to solve problems that are related to ocean, marine and maritime sectors. Now, broadly speaking, most people think that the maritime sector is just things like shipping and big giant ships with lots of shipping containers on them. But I'm here to tell you that it can also include, it could also include things like telemedicine, because the crew members, they do invariably get sick and they do require remote treatment. So I'll get to how this is cross-disciplinary in a moment, but let me finish the definition. It broadly encompasses various technologies and integration with existing market segments. So these are, we're not saying that the blue economy is this brand new area. We're saying that it has these kind of constituent parts and that they all fit together and they coalesce under things that either come out of the ocean or go into it or move through it. These could include robotics, life science, shipping and logistics, ag tech, energy, transportation, aerospace, fisheries and aquaculture, and then of course, clean tech. The main areas of focus for the blue economy more broadly is commercialization, because I think most people would say that the blue economy, we haven't really heard much about what the blue economy is. We probably have heard about it in passing. It's relatively new. So, I mean, at least that expression is relatively new. So commercialization is kind of a major focus of where we are with the blue economy. It's cross and multidisciplinary. So it looks at ways in which we can add on different technologies as we need it. It's cross and multi-sectored. So within the blue economy itself, it could fall within various market categories, and some of those cross over. It's science and engineering led, although there are significant capabilities around the enabling technologies that create an avenue for these things to kind of work together, mesh together. So it could be something like aquaculture and using some kind of energy resource from the ocean, like wave energy, in order to kind of harness that energy to use in the aquaculture business. So if you look at it in those terms, then we've got these enabling technologies, including dashboards, software as a service, apps, all of those kinds of things that fit into that. And then, of course, there's an existing infrastructure around the ocean. We have ports, we have coastal ecosystems, we have the Navy, we have, and when I'm thinking about infrastructure, I'm also thinking about that institutional infrastructure. So we have regulatory environment, we have the business environment, we have offshore real estate, even there's one for Filippo as well. So at some point, I'll discuss a little bit about that in a moment. We have categorized the blue economy into kind of these 6 areas, which are kind of what we think are just work better for us, that we can kind of manage the sectors a little bit better. And so I've kind of put this diagram in here, this beehive kind of diagram here, which kind of shows that smart cities, materials and resources and construction, kind of we've grouped that together. We've got biotech, ag tech and aquaculture that we've kind of put together as well. We can include fisheries in that, fisheries and aquaculture. Logistics, transports, deep sea and deep space. You know, when Elon Musk was landing his SpaceX things on barges out at sea, we immediately thought, okay, so now ports becoming spaceports as well. So we're really kind of getting into this environment where it's broadening. Soon, you know, the blue economy will probably include nearly every sector within the economy and wherever it touches the ocean. I have an expression, if we want to grow the blue economy, that we should apply the kind of the Fight Club model, right? Which is, you know, if you want to talk about the blue economy, don't talk about the blue economy, talk about everything else, all the constituent parts to kind of put it together. So that's kind of how we look at it, our approach. I think that this is kind of my business partner and colleague, Anne, constantly says to me, you know, how do we eat an elephant? And I say, you know, one bite at a time. She goes, right, so let's bite-size these things. And so I think we've done a good job at doing that. Gives us a bit more breadth. But there is a strategic focus, and I'm kind of here to kind of bring us back a little bit. Around kind of that strategic focus, there's these various use cases. The ones that we are seeing a lot more as being salient, I think, are around digital solutions, particularly machine learning and artificial intelligence. These can be things like autonomous vehicles that you rely on cameras and sensors, and that have training models that then can, you know, see through the ocean without humans. It involves a lot of robotics. It involves, you know, a lot of systems that we would generally classify as aerospace systems, and then a lot of that electronics and integration that we would see in other advanced technologies, kind of that bleeding edge technologies that are out there. Another area that I'm looking at personally is things like miniaturization and ruggedization for aquatic environments. In particular to that too is endurance. We want to have just as much endurance as, say, a drone that can stay aloft for quite some time. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. I'm also really interested in energy density and storage. I'm on the lookout for high energy density solid state batteries. I know that they don't really exist yet. I would certainly like to see things that are maybe an intermediate technology in that space. But that is something that as we move towards a more complex blue economy, we're going to need more energy density and storage. Another one would be things like around energy and peak shaving. So energy shaving and peak shaving. Things like flow batteries that we can use for storing up energies for battery power for smart cities, microgrids, bunkering and cold ironing for shipping. Those are kind of vitally important. We haven't really approached those as much as we have large batteries, battery packs, and power packs that we have now. I think are overvalued, and we need to have, I think, a hybrid systems that we can integrate into overall system for energy shaving. So energy shaving is essentially when we, at peak periods where you don't want to buy energy from the grid because it's expensive, you would use the batteries like flow batteries to shave off the amounts that you typically use. So, high cycling batteries are another area that we would be looking at. Maybe this is interesting to some people, especially molecular biologists like myself, but synthetic biology is something that is huge and growing even faster than I can produce lab space for. Synthetic biology, I think, is going to be the new up and coming area in blue tech. And I'm personally looking very much forward to it. Things like creating new materials, circular economy, drugs and other therapeutics from the ocean environment, food ingredients, everything from, lab cultured meat, all the way through to platforming various technologies within the cell, biocircuitry, things like that. So, and I would direct anyone who wants to know a little bit more about synthetic biology and the oceans to my Medium page. I only have a couple of articles there, and one of them is on synthetic biology, and I think it's actually a pretty good one. It's kind of a good summary of what's going on in the landscape. Another area that we're looking at in particular, we're seeing a lot of money going into is coastal resilience and environmental regeneration. That could be everything from carbon sequestration to tide pools to revetment walls and a range of other things that can mitigate the effects of sea level rise. Those are things that we're seeing a lot of, particularly a lot of insurance, real estate, and other risk averse agencies and businesses. So we do see a lot of that. We also see a lot of things around just any kind of remediation. So we see a lot of ocean remediation that's happening as well now. Of course, the elephant in the room is food supply. We are in a protein deficit or in a decline for protein. In another 50 years' time, we'll probably see at least a quarter of the amount of protein that we see terrestrially being managed and into the food supply. So that's problematic. That means that some of us will have plenty of protein and others will not have as much protein. We'd like to have more protein, and we'd like to have high protein throughput. So we're looking at things like value-added ingredients and yield optimization in particular. And of course, protein throughput would be another good one. We can do that through, how about it? Synthetic biology. We can manage organisms through various molecular biology ways, using biotechnology and assist the organisms in their yield optimization. So creating new value-added ingredients as well would be another area. Supply chain tracking and traceability, including provenance for the seafood industry. About half of all of the food that we get at restaurants, fish that we get at restaurants and in the supermarket are mislabeled. This is an increasing problem, particularly as we start to use more marketing labels for the fish that we eat rather than their species labels. So there is, and as stocks of the more common fish that we eat now dwindle, we will start to use fish that we have not traditionally used. And so new marketing terms will come up for those organisms, and that will be problematic from a traceability point of view. So again, we have some synthetic biology ways of looking at that. eDNA is another one that we could potentially look at. Of course, eDNA is a new technology that we can use for coastal resilience as well, especially around mangroves and mangrove forests. Ocean observing is the last one of the strategic focus use cases here. And ocean observation is inclusive of wave height, wave intensity, weather systems. So those are kind of important. especially if we want to have anything to do with aquaculture or any kind of offshore wind and those kinds of infrastructure projects that the current administration is putting some money into. So ocean observing will become an increasingly important way of helping us deal with the effects of climate change. So I'm going to pull out one example, and that's our Southern California port ecosystem, because I think that that's just a really good and local kind of example that we can use. Kind of categorized into three areas: goods movement, policy and influences, and infrastructure. There's quite a lot of opportunity, obviously, in the port sector, but in particular in Southern California. A couple of statistics. It's total cargo value is $580 billion with a B dollars. That's a lot, which is the equivalent of 20.2 equivalent container units. Now, just to put this in perspective, the port of Shanghai is just the one port. Now, this is, of course, 4 ports, but they're not very far away from each other. And 2 of the ports are very small, but Long Beach and LA are huge, enormous. The complex is enormous. By comparison, Shanghai has just about 25 million TEUs. So the combined amount of Southern California ports is enormous. And 45% of all US cargo travels through these 4 ports. 45% of all cargo in the United States travels through these 4 ports.
When you say the 4 ports, you mean
Long Beach, Wainimi, San Diego, and LA. They typically carry bulk container petroleum services, and petroleum services is broad. That includes things like refined products, as well as other kind of petro-related chemicals. Agricultural products, specialized cargo, so things like wind turbines, big things, rockets, those will be other ones. Automobiles, so roll-on, roll-off ships come in and deliver all of those nice, shiny Mercedes-Benzes from Europe. And Hyundais from Korea, South Korea as well, of course. Chemicals and tourism. And now the shipping lines are coming back on track, so we'll probably see an increase in the number of ship tourism. There's a movement at the ports towards automation. There's an unknown effects of sea level rise. We know that sometimes the water is seeping into the local surface water table. So we don't know how much that will affect port operations, but given the fact that it's, yearly cargo amount is $580 billion, I think that would be a considerable risk. Not to mention that as the sea levels rise, the cargo cranes would have to be recalibrated for high watermark operations. There are significant tidelands and environmental justice as key components in this ecosystem. So everything from marshlands to different various species. I actually have a book, if anyone wants to take a look, a magazine that is produced locally about the port ecosystem. It includes something like 400 species of birds. So it is quite significant. There is a big push to net zero on emissions, particularly looking at things like how we can reduce the actual carbon that is being emitted into the atmosphere at the port area, Long Beach, San Pedro, Wilmington especially, is a very highly, has high air pollution, particularly of NOx and SOx, diesel soot, brake dust, all kinds of stuff that's in the air, and it's pretty nasty, and it causes asthma and all kinds of other health concerns. So, so getting to net zero emissions is an important aspect for the port as well, or all 4 of those ports. Increased asset utilization is another area that we would like to see more and at least an increased use of technology to enable that, which would include things like GIS systems, mapping. We can do that using drones or perhaps doing satellites and other kinds of robotics that we can do for that. So, and then diversification of new industries. So aerospace is an obvious one, given that SpaceX had a spot down at the Port of LA for about 6 years. So, you can't talk about the oceans without talking about the regulatory agencies that control, and ironically enough, they also fund, some of the regulatory bodies also fund projects, which is good. On the federal level, we have the Army Corps of Engineers. You cannot get a permit to do anything like aquaculture or anything off the coast of California without the Army, the DoD giving approval. And then, of course, the Department of Energy wants to know what you're doing, if you're doing anything around energy resources. And NOAA wants to know what you're doing if you have anything to do with a ship. And if you're moving between spaces, they want to know. We could also add there the Coast Guard and various other agencies that are related. I'm just looking at it from a regulatory point of view, and so these are the ones that you need to get approvals from to do some things. The California Coastal Commission, it's sometimes very difficult to get permits from the California Coastal Commission, and often you need to go. It's kind of this order of when you're doing the parentheses in mathematics first, right? It's a bit like you have to do the parentheses in mathematics of the Army Corps of Engineers, get their approval before you go to the Cal Coastal Commission. Sometimes it's the other way around. So it can get kind of confusing, but essentially the California Coastal Commission wants to make sure that the best use is undertaken for the use of the coast, given that every citizen of California owns the coastline. So
how far does that extend? 300 miles or 12 miles, or what is there?
It's three and then 200-mile economic zone. That's a good question, because the California Coastal Commission actually has some inland areas that they control also. So I can't give you a good answer on that. It's a mystery even to us. It could be where the continental shelf falls off, but that's about 15 miles out. Good question. I don't know. I can table it for later and I can get an answer for you. The California State Water Board, we want to make sure that the water is safe to swim, and so stormwater is regulated, as well as other aspects of water quality. The California Air Resources Board, of course, has the various districts of the AQMD, and those management districts overlap somewhat when it comes to the ocean as well. So anything to do with fueling ships, putting stuff into the air, those things are kind of important for the Air Resources Board. And then and the air quality districts are part of that regulatory infrastructure. There are some incentive programs, which is good. And I've got an example of a couple here: the heavy duty truck voucher programs, the vessel speed reduction program, and the EV charging program, which is also being extended to pleasure craft as well, as far as I know. So there are a lot of activity going on around the world. I'm going to highlight a couple now, but as you can see, it's kind of dominated by relatively wealthy countries. and regions of kind of more temperate zones, and the kind of icy Arctic waters as well, where there's some aquaculture activities. So the Western Eurozone, so I include France, Portugal and Spain, and most of the Mediterranean, including parts of North Africa. They are concentrating on things like fisheries and kelp. The Nordic countries, Scandinavian and Nordic countries, are looking at aquaculture and value-added products. In fact, Iceland have a program to use the whole fish. So everything from scales to bones to the flesh, all being utilized for some kind of purpose, whether it's for clothing. They do make clothing out of the scales, and bones for various other purposes as well. So that's a policy that Iceland wants. Ireland has a very large aquaculture community that is growing. They also have fisheries. They also have been instrumental in growing seaweed. Of course, the gum carrageenan comes from seaweed, and it was predominantly cultivated in Ireland before it was cultivated anywhere else. So they've got a kind of a bit of a head start. There's a couple of programs in Ireland too, which is good, mainly centered around aquaculture and salmon farming in particular. Norway, of course, in the Nordics, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland as well, are big in shipping and aquaculture. So, you know, the large shipping companies, conglomerates are located in the Nordics. So it's not difficult for us to imagine how important it is for those countries. India and Southeast Asia are looking at aquaculture. They're looking at, in particular, they're looking at shrimp and prawn production, and also inland aquaculture there as well. They're growing fish in giant tanks, land-based, things like tilapia, catfish, things like that. Australasia and Oceania, so, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, concentrate mainly on fisheries, oceanography, environmental and reefs for obvious reasons. And growing areas like around Cape Town in South Africa, those are growing too. The Seychelles, Maldives, those are growing areas, and of course Dubai actually is funding a lot of maritime projects, a little bit around shipping, a lot around aquaculture, and they're extending their reach into North America as well.
So I don't see anything that you're tracking around South America. Is that for a particular reason, or no data, or?
No, I mean there are aquaculture farms in Peru and in Chile, a lot, but they don't really have a. I've kind of put on this map the areas where there are growing clusters, where it's not just aquaculture or not just that kind of essentially ocean monoculture. That there are government agencies that assist and support with grant funding or some other kind of, you know, unfair advantage, whether it's a regulatory control or there are multiple industries that are involved. So I could have put a pinpoint in Chile, but you know, sorry. So in the US and Canada, Pacific Northwest has a particular concentration, particularly around energy, shipping, aquaculture, fisheries, and clean tech. One of our contracts, I'll tell you a little bit about that later on. One of our contracts is in with the Department of Energy at Pacific Northwest National Lab, and that focus is around energy for ocean observing. So we have a project there, and it's one of the few that we only have 4 kind of regions in the United States that's really concentrating on this ocean, marine, maritime, blue economy space. The other one, of course, is the Atlantic maritime states and provinces. So that includes Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Maine, all of pretty much all of New England. There's another braid theory-like organization up there called See Ahead, and they do a pretty spectacular job as well of bringing together the different startups and technologies that are available up there in the Northeast. So another area is South Florida, which we're involved in rather heavily. The concentration there is in coral and coastal resilience. And then, of course, Southern California, that's us. Woo! Kelp, bioenergy, and life science. Given the fact that our proximity to San Diego life science community, our LA life science community, and potentially some funding from those wonderful San Francisco venture capital institutional funds. We have grown the life science area of the blue economy here in Southern California as much as we can. So, and we're going to continue to do that as long as we need more lab space. I will continue to build it. I have made a commitment to building my labs in shipping containers, and I'll tell you a little bit about that momentarily. Other growing areas in North America are Hawaii and Alaska. In Alaska, of course, value-added products, tourism, fisheries, and fish processing. I think the H got cut off from my world map diagram. Sorry about that. They also have considerable concentration in the Native American communities. And so it's that's an important area to kind of understand too, about how that fits into the blue economy in places like Alaska and the Pacific Northwest too, but Alaska a lot. So why blue tech? It's a sector that will grow to about 350 billion by 2022. So not very far away. These were 2018 numbers. So we actually are probably looking at closer to about $400 billion opportunity. We've seen a 271% increase in investment from 2015 and 400% since 2016. So exponential growth in the blue economy. We're seeing at least 12 new funds being produced every year in the blue economy. So we actually had 20 this year, 20 new funds, including us. So that's pretty big. It's a lot of money. It's relatively nascent, so we can pick and choose pretty bright new companies. We can reach out to academic communities. We can foster the growth in that cross-disciplinary nature of the blue economy to include a number of different kinds of disciplines, so that we can create whole systems within the ocean environment. And it's relatively green field. There are a lot of opportunities for a lot of players to come in still and take some ground. And I think that that's really, really good for investment. It's really, really good for return on investment. And it's very, very good for industry itself. So once those startups get rolling, they have a better chance of success, at least early on. We don't know what that will mean in the next 10 to 15 years. Maybe it will turn into like what the ag tech space it looks like. But I think given that the oceans are quite vast, we have much more potential than what we think. Thank you, Bruce. That's the first dad joke of the evening. I appreciate it though. Then it wouldn't be a field then either. Sorry, that's the second dad joke. So why now? Well, the world is about 90% ocean, if you consider the depth as well. But we only have about 2% of utilization, which is relatively small. we've had a 200% increase in ocean research activity just in the last 5 years. So that's actually very, very significant. And that's everything from, bathymetry, looking at the ocean column, all the way through to, the life science categories around synthetic biology. Lack of domain expertise across industries related to the oceans. So we need to have more of that, including the ability to deploy capital. It is the next frontier of development. I see it as much more intermediary than space. We can't really kind of cross the chasm yet into space, but we certainly can cross the chasm in the ocean. It represents the next blue sky opportunity. Shameless plug for Braid Theory now, but I kind of give you an idea of the kinds of activities that we're up to and why we do what we do. We are a much more hybrid model. People ask us, so you're in VC. Well, no, but kind of yeah, but no, but yeah. So then you're an incubator. Well, yeah, we've got space and we've got an incubation campus, but we don't actually run that space. We're kind of tenants there. We've got kind of carte blanche almost, but I shouldn't say that, and we don't really have carte blanche, but we have some freedom to operate. So you're an accelerator then? Well, yeah, that's true. We have accelerator programs, and we do provide some funding and some backup and support for teams. Also, then what are you, Jim? Well, we're a hybrid. We're a vertically integrated venture advisory, or VIVA. I invented that, by the way. So I like to say that because we're doing a lot more than just supporting entrepreneurs with some money and some connections, and I like to say that we like to kick their ass a little bit. So I'm allowed to say that, right? Yeah, I did anyway. We like to leverage our grant writing ability. We are pretty dedicated to that. So that way we have some undiluted funds to do some do research and development projects. In particular, SBIR, but also our Department of Energy partners have provided us with an easier pathway, a smooth pathway for the voucher program, for the DOE voucher program. We have a biolab, biosafety level 1, so don't hold your breath. You can't do like really toxic stuff. It's fun, it's safe. It's like a high school lab, except that we've got an HPLC and a PCR, and we've got all kinds of cool stuff like that, right? We're going to add some prototyping to that pretty shortly, and we're going to be doing some robotics and other stuff that's around, building up platforms and sensors and things like that. So yeah, and pilot projects. We have a number of pilot projects that we're working on to supplement the ones that we have access to already, including some that are through some of our corporate partners. That's exciting because we're kind of moving into this phase where we're starting to get NGOs interested in what we're doing around kelp and coral, and if those pan out, then we will have a kind of a more end-to-end, from contractors and everyone within the milieu, that will be able to help provide some of the meat to the pilot projects and kind of carry that further so that we can build these out to large-scale projects rather than just pilots. So part of our model is to look at space, fund, events, programs, business development, and strategic consulting, so that we can kind of build out this integration model that I think is really, really needed, and I think not sought after enough in other industries, but we have the opportunity to do it because it's the blue economy and it's relatively new. I can't imagine that this would happen in the e-commerce space anymore. So I think that greenfield is gone. So what are our programs? Well, we have LA Blue, which is a pre-accelerator program. and our Celsius program, which is a synthetic biology program. Now, these are funded through a grant from the City of Los Angeles. So that is really, really helpful. So is our Blue Plus Ocean Accelerator program. We've already selected a couple of companies and we have a couple more open spaces. And then we have our Florida Blue program as well. That is looking at, in particular, it's looking at water and energy, sustainability, including resilience, ocean observation, and ports and logistics. Does anyone see anything on here that looks a little out of place, but it's not out of place if you know who I am? No? This is the Devo Energy Dome.
Yes, I noticed that.
Okay. We're just a little bit nerdy and geeky at Braid Theory, so I apologize in advance.
It's wonderful that was in there.
I'm glad someone picked it up. So we also conduct quite significant accelerator as a service projects. We don't get those teams selected for us, but it considerably increases our deal flow. So we're not complaining. We've seen about 80 odd companies this year. So I can't say that I'm worried about how much potential comes across my desk. We have a market entry program with the Canadian government. And we also have a Canadian Southern California Clean Tech Express accelerator program with a number of companies that are in the ports track for ocean energy and port related grid energy systems. And then finally, one of our projects with the Department of Energy is Powering the Blue Economy Ocean Observing Prize, where they get some prize money after they go through a number of hoops, including going through our program, poor souls. And we kind of put them through that rigor and methodology that is kind of the Braid Theory hallmark. And hopefully out the other end, once we make the sausage, we get a nice product at the end of that, which is a startup that ultimately will go on and power some aspect of the blue economy, whether it's aquaculture or water desalinization or something like that. So those are just a couple of our accelerators as a service. We should be adding a couple more next year, including another Canadian one, and some of the provinces in Canada are also looking at. We see a lot of Canadians, by the way, just so that you know. This will be our 5th Canadian cohort that's come through our program, and then we also have done in the past Quebec government as well. So we do get to see a lot of Canadians, and they want to actually increase the amount of Canadian companies that are in the blue sector. So that's good. And then we've also got some other irons in the fire with some other nations as well. Portugal, and I'm meeting with the Portuguese government next week. And if we add them, we'll have quite a significant number of startups that will come from Portugal, early stage startups that will come from Portugal into our program. So looking forward to that a lot. They've got some really cool ones around fisheries. Some of our other activities, we're a part of Ocean Exchange. We're not only a sponsor, but we also are on the board of Ocean Exchange, and Ocean Exchange is sponsored by the shipping company Wallenius Wilhelmsen. They provide 2 $100,000 undiluted prize packages for startups that enter into the challenge. They look at areas around coastal resiliency, decarbonisation. I think those were the 2 that were the main focus this year. And then there's a $45,000 student prize as well for student innovation in the blue economy. Was won by a team that was doing reef-related stuff. So we also developed the Ocean Enterprise Collective, which combines all of the clusters in North America. And we kind of sit and chat and cogitate on new developments in the blue economy, and we kind of switch and swap out teams as we like, where it might be appropriate. An interesting thing about the ocean environment too is that you know, in Los Angeles and kind of our port ecosystem that we have here, it's a warm water port, but there are cold water ports, and there are kind of cold water regions which, if they really wanted to kind of test out their products, they could also have a temperate port to do that. And likewise, if we wanted to kind of ruggedize for ice conditions, our kind of products from Southern California, which, you know, don't really like the cold very much, you know, like our technology loves the sunshine, for example, and we like palm trees, right? So sometimes we might have to send them up to Alaska to do some testing. So we've got that partnership, those partnerships there. So having the Ocean Enterprise Collective is a really, really good chance for us to see what's actually going on within the broader ecosystem. And then we also have our demo day slash summit slash challenge. We have a challenge pitch competition as well, Ignite 22, where we look at all of the companies that are in not only the blue economy, but we also are looking at other things as well. We've got some companies that are doing remote sensing from satellites and stuff as part of like looking at aquaculture and species loss mitigation. So those are areas that we kind of look at as well. Like I told you, it's cross-disciplinary, so we get to see a lot of things. And so we do have a bit of reach. These are our two kind of regions. The one on the left is the kind of South Florida area of focus. And then of course, our Los Angeles area of focus is on the right. Within that, we have various stakeholders that we engage with regularly. Part of that is to increase not only our deal flow, but also to kind of see what we've got, so that we can kind of find where there are gaps, category manage our portfolios, and figure out where we need to put more resources. We've also got and we're leading into our advanced projects initiatives. We have two on the table right now, which is our Coral project in South Florida and the Grand Bahamas. We are in conjunction with a number of nonprofits and an NGO, as well as the Blue Action Lab in Grand Bahama. We also have the Kelp initiative here in Los Angeles, and we're also, if anyone saw the KTLA thing this morning that we were on, you would have seen the kind of the kelp growing, and some of our other companies as well were on that. There's a link on my LinkedIn if anyone's interested. And then probably next year, after we do a small hackathon to kind of see where we are in the AI world, we will launch our AI advanced project initiative around the blue economy, and then we'll add ocean observation to those advanced projects initiatives as well. I was mentioning earlier during the networking time that one of the areas of ocean observing that I would really, really like to do would be kind of like loyal wingman kind of submarines. I don't know what you would call them. You can't call them really wingmen, but kind of autonomous gliders that would operate from a mothership. That kind of stuff would really, really interest me. So that would combine possibly the AI as well, and possibly for use with coral and kelp. So I'm pretty excited about that. And that's it. That's all I have for you, I'm afraid. Thank you. Any?
Your accelerator as a service, how does that compare to Techstars?
Well, okay, so it's different, right? I mean, we don't provide funding up front because, you know, it's a toss-up what we're going to get. We provide funding at the back end, or we bring in our investment partners. one of our capital partners, or several of our capital partners are from Israel, from Europe, from Canada. So it's kind of broad. They're not necessarily local. It's not just angel funding that we're after. We're also after, you know, serious seed money as well. We definitely see a gap in seed funding and angel investment in the blue economy. We're not tech stars because we don't have that same. We think that our methodology is a bit more rigorous. We have deep and long domain expertise and a lot of connections, in particular around the blue economy. And so I think that that's an important aspect that's often overlooked, that strong and specific domain expertise. We serve on several boards related to the blue economy. So I think that given those organizations on which we serve, on the boards in which we serve, those are sponsored by the large shipping companies and large aquaculture concerns, that I think that we're in a much better position to offer blue economy companies a better chance of survival in the long term. We want companies that chug along kind of nicely, you know.
And we have a person on our advisory board who's a former roommate of mine who lives in Melbourne. So how is Australia? Are they involved in this?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with BlueX, of which I'm actually a partner in that as well. And we're looking at a new net zero grant that's coming on from the New South Wales government. New South Wales government's providing $380 million of grant funding for net zero around various industries, and the industrial processes that we are looking at in particular is aquaculture, shipping, and food processing. So that's what we'll be writing our grant for. And then we want to create a research hub in Sydney, which one doesn't exist. And we want to be kind of in the middle between, you know, the James Cook University, which has lots of stuff around the reef, and University of Tasmania, which has a lot of stuff around the Antarctic. So if we can meet in the middle, we can get the best of both worlds.
Question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a lot of stuff about AI and machine learning, but one of the kind of up and coming, at least Microsoft was exploring this idea of doing, sea-based data centers for cooling purposes. Do you have any connection with that?
Yeah, you know, we do, but I don't think that's really in our. I mean, we're dealing with early stage startups, and I think that those larger infrastructure projects, I think, require more heavy lifting than what we can achieve. I mean, we do a lot of heavy lifting,
Right.
but we do it a lot for the startups. What we might find is that those projects will require a startup to come in and be at some kind of level of integration, but I don't, or at the pilot level, but I don't really see that, or maybe there might be a funding opportunity. You know, Microsoft says, you know, we'll give you $1 million as part of your seed fund if you help us out with this project. So it could be a horses for courses kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean, there's the whole blockchain, you know, drop.
Yeah, I don't want to bring up Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of that stuff for, you know, and using seawater for cooling. Get back to me in like 5 years' time and we'll see where it is. I'm skeptical, you know?
Me too.
All right, good.
Where did grade theory get its name? Is it related to this or something?
No, we're just nerdy mathematicians, I suppose, that figured that, you know, calling a company after some obscure area of geometry is cool.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
I don't know if you mentioned it, did you say how much of the infrastructure bill is going to be focused on investments in what we would call blue economy?
You know, I don't know the total, but I do know that we're going after a Build Back Better grant. I think it's $60 million that we're going after this grant, with some other ancillary projects that are related to that. We have a public-private partnership with the City of Los Angeles. So together with us and AltaC and USC, UCLA, Caltech, I mean, there's a couple of them. We're all kind of going after this Build Back Better grant. And if we get it, then, you know, I'll be super happy. And we'll be able to do so much, you know, like literally so much stuff with it, which will be great. Certainly build out the KELP Advanced Projects Initiative, and then bring on investment partners, which I think, you know, like bigger investment partners, kind of beyond the beyond Series A partners that we kind of really want, because we want to have that kind of end-to-end and, you know, horizontal and vertical integration in here. I think we've got the opportunity to do it and build that out. So why not do it, right? And yeah, sure, it has been a struggle in the past, and, you know, living off baked beans and ramen hasn't been great, but, you know, you know, ultimately we're starting to see the successes, and it's, you know, hard work and, you know, rolling up the sleeves and not being afraid to tell the startups what they need to know.
Kim, this is Brenda from the Zoom world. I've got
Yeah.
a couple of questions here from our other Zoomers. Elijah is interested in knowing if you are involved in projects or programs involved in combating and mitigating rising sea levels and climate change. When he thinks of the ocean, his first thought is rising sea levels and the effects of climate change.
The answer is yes. We do look at areas of, you know, climate change, the effects of. We do look at mitigating the effects of climate change. Most of the startups that we get into our cohorts have either 3 or 4 of the UN sustainability goals. The SDGs are kind of a way for us to kind of put a framework around that kind of, you know, validating, I suppose, the core competencies of the startup. I think that we have a commitment to, you know, as a kind of a mission-driven but for-profit company, we have an obligation. We've set ourselves an obligation for environmental protection, and that includes mitigating the effects of climate change. I don't think we can do it on our own, and I don't want to turn into an advocacy organization either. So I don't kind of want that mission creep, but certainly want to advocate without speaking about it. Advocate by, you know, by innovation.
And similarly, Mark Bruger is wondering if sea rise is the biggest risk. It seems like most of the parties would have a preference that the ocean stay reasonably status quo. Are there other risks that are bigger than that now or on the horizon?
Certainly ocean pollution. I think there's a big plastic issue. I think there's a circular economy issue as well. I think we've got to find new products from the ocean, materials. We can certainly mine seawater for, I don't know, everything from cobalt to gold. So that might be something that we can perhaps exploit at some level. And I mean positive exploitation, not negative exploitation. I don't mean that in that sense. I think that another major issue is species loss and potential climate collapse. I don't think that's an effect of sea level rise per se, but it certainly is something that's related to global warming itself.
And that's it from the world of Zoom, so I'll return it back to your room.
Okay.
One more question. What about electric shipping? I mean, they talk about how much ships are polluting. Is anyone working to try to electrify the shipping fleet?
They are a lot. There's the problem is how do you push that much cargo through the oceans on electric power? And I think that's going to be an ongoing issue. I mean, I just don't think I don't think the technology is there yet. I mean, look, I mean, we have diesel electric submarines, right? So I think that, and they operate well, but they don't operate at vast distances because there's a limit to, you know, their battery power. Okay, so regular ships don't need to snorkel to get like recharge their batteries, but I just don't think that, you know, if you're on a tight schedule from, you know, Los Angeles to Singapore, I don't think you want to be on battery power and you're only doing like 8 knots. I think you want to be on much more efficient power or a hybrid system of power that gets you closer to 20 knots, you know, 18 to 20 knots.
Okay, any more questions? Then thank you again for coming.